You can't succeed at what you don't dare to be. Carl Jung. Why do you speak so harshly to yourself for mistakes others have already forgiven you for? Do you work hard all day and still feel like it's never enough? In this journey, we'll explore what science says about self-acceptance and how Carl Jung might have approached it. In the research article Self-Acceptance in the Psychology of Success, researcher Sayfullokh Kozimov presents us with an uncomfortable truth. You can be successful out there and still feel like a failure inside. Because without self-acceptance, every achievement feels hollow. Kozimov, a pioneering psychologist in linking success with mental health, shows us that true success isn't about reaching goals, but about making peace with who we are. Subscribe and click the bell. It really helps the channel. Let's start by defining what is self-acceptance. Self-acceptance is the ability to recognize and value oneself, embracing both strengths and weaknesses. It involves an attitude of unconditional appreciation toward oneself, independent of external achievements or others' approval. This acceptance isn't about complacency. It's the solid foundation for personal growth and development. Why is self-acceptance important for personal success? It increases self-confidence. People who practice self-acceptance tend to trust their abilities more and face challenges with greater assurance. A psychological well-being. It reduces destructive self-criticism and supports emotional resilience, helping to manage difficulties more effectively. Authentic motivation. Accepting your personal reality fosters genuine motivation for growth and learning, rather than acting out of fear of failure or rejection. A personal growth. Self-acceptance allows you to identify areas for improvement without falling into self-denial, making authentic and lasting change possible. Important, the difference between self-acceptance and self-esteem. Self-acceptance. Unconditional acceptance of oneself, recognizing both the positive and the negative. Main focus, personal respect and appreciation. Self-esteem, a value judgment based on performance or comparison with others. Main focus, worth based on achievements. Benefits of self-acceptance in success. Aspect impact, self-confidence, greater assurance in facing challenges and learning from mistakes. Psychological well-being, reduction of self-criticism and increased emotional resilience. Authentic motivation, a genuine drive for personal and professional growth. Honest self-assessment enables identification of areas for improvement without denial. Personal commitment, greater persistence in goals aligned with one's own values. Strategies to cultivate self-acceptance. Practice self-compassion. Treat yourself kindly in the face of mistakes and failures. A mindfulness. Observe thoughts and emotions without judgment. Honest recognition of strengths and weaknesses. Take a realistic inventory of your abilities. Set goals aligned with personal values. Pursue objectives that reflect your genuine inner interests. Conclusion. Self-acceptance is a foundational pillar in the psychology of success. It not only enhances well-being and self-confidence, but also provides the groundwork for authentic, sustainable personal growth. Fostering self-acceptance helps unlock your potential and allows you to live a fuller, more satisfying life. However, we're still left with some important questions. How does self-acceptance influence resilience in the face of challenges? What's the connection between self-acceptance and the development of social skills? And what are the benefits of integrating mindfulness practices into the process of acceptance? Maybe Carl Jung's analysis can help us find some answers. What you didn't know about yourself. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but deep down, something still feels empty? Have you looked at yourself in the mirror with a list of achievements in hand and still failed to recognize yourself? This is the blind spot of success, that place where external applause can't silence the internal void. We live in a world that celebrates performance, appearance, efficiency, but forgets the most essential thing, the relationship you have with yourself. And whether you realize it or not, you carry that relationship with you every day. Carl Jung once said, "What is not made conscious manifests in our lives as fate." What if your destiny isn't what you think you're chasing, but what you're avoiding accepting about yourself? In this journey, we're not going to talk about motivation or empty success formulas. we'll talk about something much more intimate, about what no one sees, but defines you, your ability to accept yourself. Not as you should be, but as you are, including everything you even hide from yourself. Because behind every demand you place on yourself, behind every "I should be better," there's an unacknowledged emotional wound and a chance to heal. This video isn't a quick fix. It's a deep exploration, a walk through the corners you've avoided looking into, but that scream every time you sit in silence. We're going to dive into that inner space where success, shadow, and soul meet, because accepting who you are is not giving up. It's the beginning of true power, the kind that doesn't need a mask. If you've ever felt broken on the inside, even when everything seems fine on the outside, this video is for you. And if it resonates with you, stay with us. You're not alone. We're going in together so you can come out on fire. The self that seems to be fine. You wake up, check your phone. There are emails, messages, to-dos, reminders. The routine starts like always. You drink your coffee, respond, get things done, check things off. From the outside, everything looks fine. You've even said it yourself so many times. I'm fine, tired, but fine. As if tiredness were the only acceptable way to admit that something doesn't feel quite right. You've learned to stay in control, to function, to be responsible, to smile in meetings, be kind to your family, meet your goals. And if something breaks inside, you hide it, ignore it, cover it up with another task. The image you project is strong, capable, reliable. The version of you the world sees is functional. But underneath it all, something creaks. There's a kind of noise beneath the surface. A fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. A constant sense of not being enough, even when others tell you that you are. A quiet fear that, at any moment, everything could fall apart. You don't talk about it with anyone, because you can't afford to, because there are things you just don't say, because you're the one who solves problems, not the one who falls apart. And yet, you are falling apart, bit by bit, every day, in the invisible places, in the parts no one sees, in the things you refuse to admit to yourself. You've built an ego that adapts to everything, to success, to pressure, to recognition. But that same ego has become armor you no longer know how to take off. You constantly push yourself. You believe that if you just improve a little more, achieve one more thing, then finally you'll feel complete. But peace never comes. Only more tasks, more goals, more comparisons. Does that sound familiar? That self who seems to be fine isn't fake. It's just incomplete. It's not lying. It's just surviving. Because no one ever taught you that you were valuable, even when you're doing nothing, when you're not performing, when you simply exist. They taught you to strive, not to listen to yourself, to improve, not to embrace yourself, to compete, not to understand yourself. That's why, when night falls and everything goes quiet, you're left alone with that inner voice that doesn't know how to comfort you, only how to judge. A voice that says, "You should be doing better. This isn't enough. You're not doing it right. You're not who you pretend to be." And the real problem isn't that the world can't see it. It's that you no longer know which part of you is real, and which part is just a character you created to be accepted. But no one can wear a mask forever. Sooner or later, it begins to slip. And when that happens, that's when the real journey begins. When the mask is no longer enough. There comes a moment in life when the mask no longer fits. It doesn't scream. It's more of a persistent whisper, a quiet discomfort within, as if your soul is beginning to say, "This isn't me anymore," but you keep going. You cling to the routine, the habits, the responsibilities, and you repeat, "I'm fine. I just need to keep going," until one day you simply can't. Something breaks inside. Sometimes it's a failure you didn't see coming, or a relationship that ends without explanation, or simply the fact that no matter how hard you try, nothing excites you anymore. It's as if everything that once had meaning has turned dull. Your smile becomes effort, your enthusiasm a memory, and the future a burden you don't want to face. You feel like you shouldn't feel this way because you have a job, food, people who love you. And yet, inside, everything feels empty. And that's where the real conflict begins. Not with the world, with yourself. Because you don't understand why you feel this way. You wonder if you're being ungrateful, if you're overreacting, if maybe you just need to try harder. But something inside you is no longer cooperating. That part of you that used to force itself to please, to perform, to endure, is starting to rebel. And it doesn't do so with shouting. It does so with silence, with lack of motivation, with quiet anxiety, with sleepless nights that have no clear cause, with tears that come out of nowhere. And you, who always knew what to do, now don't know where to begin. Your ego tells you to keep going, not to stop. But your soul is asking for rest. Not physical rest. A rest from the character you've been playing for years. And that tension between what you show and what you feel is slowly breaking you. The mask that once protected you now suffocates you. You can't breathe inside it anymore. You can't keep living just to meet expectations. You start asking yourself questions you never dared to before. What do I really want? Who am I when no one's watching? Does what I do every day mean anything to me? And even if you don't have clear answers yet, you know something inside you is shifting. Something deep. Something that's no longer content with staying on the surface. It's the beginning of a calling. One that doesn't come from the outside world, or from logic, but from your soul. That calling isn't a loud voice. It's a crack, a tremor inside, a sadness that no quick fix can cure. And right there, when everything seems to fall apart, is when the true journey begins. Not the journey toward success, but the journey toward yourself. But to cross that threshold, you'll have to face something you've always avoided, your shadow. No one wants to look at their shadow. We prefer to believe the darkness is out there, that what's broken, ugly, or chaotic has nothing to do with us. But Jung was clear. The shadow is everything we don't want to be, but are. It's the part of you that you deny, the part you hide in meetings, the part you silence in your relationships, the part you reject when it shows up as jealousy, envy, apathy, fear, anger, or sadness. And yet, the shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It simply hides. And from there, it begins to run your life without you even realizing it. Your perfectionism, for example, might just be the mask of unspoken shame. Your need for control, a way to avoid ever feeling vulnerable again. Your difficulty trusting others, a defense built around old wounds that never healed. All of that is part of your shadow. And every time you try to eliminate it instead of integrating it, you drift further from yourself. But you don't have to fear it. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your forgotten part, your unheard pain, your unspoken truth. It's the little girl or boy you once were, who was told that certain emotions were bad, that they had to behave, obey, stay quiet, not feel too much. And so, entire parts of your being were repressed just so you could fit in. That was necessary to survive at the time. But today, that shadow is still asking to be seen. Every time you explode without reason, every time you sabotage yourself just as things are going well, every time you feel empty despite achieving what you wanted, that's the shadow knocking on your door. And even if it hurts, it's an invitation, not to fight it, but to listen. But be careful. At this stage of the journey, many people run. They distract themselves. They seek refuge in the noise, in overwork, in empty relationships, in consumption, in anything that keeps them from looking inward. Because facing your shadow is facing yourself. And that takes courage. Courage to say, yes, I am also that which I don't want to see. I also have darkness, not just light. I've also caused harm, not just been hurt. But that kind of recognition marks the beginning of something deeply healing. Because when you finally stop fighting yourself, you can start truly listening to yourself. The shadow stops sabotaging you when you make it part of you. When you integrate it, not with judgment, but with compassion. And then something shifts. You're no longer the same. You start to feel more honest with yourself, more whole, less fragmented. Yes, it hurts, but it also brings relief, because you finally stop pretending and give yourself permission to be human. This is the threshold. There is no way back, only the path forward. And what comes next goes even deeper, a dialogue with your inner archetypes, with the voices that live within you, with the masks you inherited and no longer need. Dialogue with my archetypes. After you face your shadow, you can't go on as you were, but you also don't quite know who you are now. You're in a kind of in-between, uncertain, fragile, but deeply honest. And this is where the archetypes begin to emerge. Symbolic figures that live in your unconscious, waiting to be recognized not by the mind, but by the soul. They are inner voices, parts of you, some inherited, some born from pain, others from your purest essence. You start to hear the perfectionist, that voice that's always demanding, never satisfied, the one that keeps repeating, "It's not enough. You're not enough." But if you pause, and instead of silencing it, you listen, you discover that this voice was born from a deep fear of rejection, a fear of not being loved unless you were perfect. And then, instead of fighting it, you can say, "I don't need to be flawless to be loved." Then comes the inner critic, sharp, unyielding, always pointing out your mistakes. It's been with you since childhood, when you confused correction with punishment, when you believed that if you were harsh enough with yourself, others couldn't hurt you first. But today you can respond with firmness and kindness. I can learn without punishing myself. Next appears the Savior, the one who sacrifices for everyone, the one who doesn't know how to say no, the one who carries what isn't theirs, just to feel worthy. And when you see them clearly, you can say, "I don't have to save anyone to deserve love." And in the midst of it all, you may encounter the wounded child, that subtle, powerful archetype, the one who still cries for what they never understood, for the nameless pain, for the hugs that never came, for the silences that left them confused. That child doesn't need you to fix them. They just need to be seen, to be heard, to be told, "I'm here now, and I won't leave you." This dialogue with your archetypes isn't a mental exercise. It's an emotional ritual, a deep soul cleansing, a way to reconcile with all your parts, even the ones you once tried to erase. And through this process, something inside starts to come into alignment, as if, little by little, your inner home begins to take shape. Not perfect, but authentic. You begin to notice that many of your life decisions didn't come from freedom, but from your wounds, that your achievements weren't always driven by passion, but by fear of failure, that many of your relationships weren't about love, but about needing validation. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you aware. And awareness is the beginning of true power, because when you identify your archetypes, when you give them names and space, you can choose. You no longer react automatically. You stop running from yourself. You stop living programmed by old wounds. You begin to live from a new place, a place not built on fear, but on presence. And there, something new appears, a symbol, a guide, an archetype that doesn't demand from you, but walks beside you, your inner ally, the part of you that knows, that has always known, but needed silence and truth to finally speak. And that ally whispers that it's time to return to yourself, to stop looking out there for what has always lived within, to come back to yourself, not as you were, but as you never allowed yourself to be. And one day, without even planning it, you notice yourself breathing differently, not because everything is fixed, but because at last, you're in yourself. There is a strange peace in not pretending, a deep relief in no longer demanding to be someone else. You don't need to shout it or prove it. You just know. Something inside has settled, as if after so many battles, you've finally found solid ground. Not perfect, but yours. You've crossed a process that many avoid, the one where you look inward and don't run from what you find. And what you now possess is not success in the usual sense. to something more powerful: identity. You no longer need external validation to feel worthy. You're no longer defined by your productivity or your image. You no longer chase yourself with the voice of your inner critic. Now you walk to a different rhythm, one that honors your pace, that respects your silences, that dares to feel without asking for permission. You've begun the path of individuation, that word Jung used to describe the soul's most important journey, becoming who you truly are. And that doesn't mean you have it all figured out, or that you no longer have wounds. It means you're willing to live with emotional honesty, and from that place, a symbol arises. Maybe an image, a memory, a word, something that represents your truth, your essence. Could be something as simple as learning to say no without guilt, or allowing yourself to cry without feeling weak, or choosing not to explain your emotions to someone who never wanted to understand them. That symbol becomes a personal ritual. You don't need temples or altars, just presence. Those small actions you now do with awareness. Sleeping when you're tired, pausing when something hurts, naming what you once kept hidden, embracing yourself when no one else does. And without realizing it, you begin to write a new story, one where you're not the one who achieves everything, but the one who finds themselves. Your story is no longer about proving. It's about inhabiting yourself. And that new narrative starts to reflect in your surroundings. People change. Decisions change. Priorities rearrange. Not from pressure, but from truth. And that truth doesn't need to be explained. It's felt. Because when someone has found themselves, you can tell. Not by how they speak, but by how they look at you, by how they are present, by how they breathe, even in the middle of chaos. That is your reward. Not a goal, not a trophy, not a title. Your reward is returning to yourself and knowing that even if the world screams otherwise, you don't need to be someone else to deserve love. You only need to be you, with everything that comes with that, with everything that sets you free. And so, the journey begins again, not outward, but deeper inward, because now you know the search was never for success. It was for you. And you are here now. Return with fire. Something in you is no longer the same. You've crossed the abyss. You've spoken to your shadow, watched your masks fall, felt the trembling of your soul, and you didn't run. That is braver than any visible achievement. The world won't notice it right away. No one will applaud you for what you cried about in silence. No one will post on social media how deep you went. But you know, you feel it. And that's enough, because the fire you now carry inside is not to be displayed, it's to be inhabited. Carl Jung said it plainly: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, and you are returning, not from pressure, but from truth, not from the wound, but from integration. This journey wasn't to turn you into someone else. It was to help you remember who you were, before the world told you that wasn't enough. Now you know that self-acceptance isn't passivity. The sacred rebellion. The saying, I won't keep punishing myself for not being perfect. I won't beg for love disguised as success. I won't hide my humanity just to fit someone else's mold. Your story didn't start today, but today, you are finally the one writing it, and you will return with fire. That fire that doesn't destroy, but transforms. The fire that burns away the false and leaves only what is real, because now you know you deserve to be at peace. Not when you've accomplished everything, but right now exactly as you are. You don't need to have everything figured out. You just need to be present, to choose yourself even on your broken days, to care for yourself even when no one notices, to respect yourself even when everything around you shakes. That is true success. The kind that isn't measured in numbers, but in authenticity. You didn't come back with a title, you came back with fire, and that fire doesn't burn out. It spreads, plants seeds. It becomes a guide for others, because when one person accepts themselves, they give the world permission to do the same. And maybe that's your deepest mission. Share your fire. If something inside you stirred while watching this video, don't ignore it. What you felt wasn't a coincidence. It was your soul saying, there's something here for you. Maybe you can't put it into words. Maybe it was just a pause, a silent tear, a knot in your throat, a long sigh you hadn't released in years. That too is transformation. Because sometimes we don't need more theories. We just need someone to look at us and say, without saying it, I get it. I've been there too. And if you felt that today, you're not alone. There are many of us here learning to let go of the mask, to embrace our shadows, to walk without disguising the soul. And now the fire you found can also become a lighthouse for someone else. This is the moment to share, because you never know whose life you might change, just by showing your own transformation. Let me hear from you in the comments. What part moved you the most? What did you feel was speaking directly to you? And if this message resonated with you, share this video with someone who needs it. They may not say it out loud, but they've been waiting for exactly this. Thank you for making it this far. Thank you for looking inward. And remember, acceptance is not the end of the path. It's the beginning of the true encounter. See you on the next journey.